change this habit before it becomes too late. I was about the worst financial advisor you've ever met. The easiest $5,000 I'd ever made. There's a huge amount of traffic that comes here. I see this and just lose my mind. We could be swallowed up and removed tomorrow. We have a ton of data. And we've got a ton of knowledge. If we can combine that and use a custom AI, we build out what's called Falcon AI, making sure that you've got testimonials, reviews, case studies showing actual results. So it's really an ongoing, non-stop content production process in order to remain relevant. Ask at the right time, that matters. If there's a problem, take that offline.
1, 2, 3, 4. Want to attract and convert more leads? Want to learn how digital PR, branding, and SEO can establish and build your brand identity? Welcome to the Market Movers Building Brands and Links with Linkify podcast. We answer these questions and help you ramp up your brand visibility and credibility. Let's cut through the noise and make your business the talk of the town. We're your hosts, Nick and Chris. Let's get this show on the road.
Welcome to the Market Movers podcast. Today, we're exploring local SEO strategies with David Hunter, CEO of Local Falcon. Welcome.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
David, thanks for coming on. So to kick things off, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and your background in marketing?
Sure. So I am living currently in Pennsylvania, right on the Great Lakes. I have been here. I was sort of born and raised, moved away, went to Fordham University in New York, and basically I was pretty spoiled growing up. So my father was paying for my university, and I, took full advantage of that, and basically found myself just getting C's and partying every day, and realized that I better change this habit before it becomes before it's too late. And so with a shred of dignity intact, I packed my stuff and moved back home to Pennsylvania here, and that was like 17 some years ago. I took a real job, I said, and basically started waiting tables and earning money, and tried to finish school as fast as possible. And then at the same time, I also met who is my wife today, Jessica. We started dating pretty quickly, and very very shortly after that, just a couple years later, we were married and having babies. But I also at the same time was finished school as fast as possible, took a job as a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. I was about the worst financial advisor you've ever met. I just couldn't stand that job. I'm all of like 20, 21 years old, and they're like, hey, just go get retirement plans for small business owners. That's no big deal, right? I'm like, yeah, I'm qualified for that. Like, no. So 2008 comes, the market crashes, Merrill Lynch becomes insolvent, gets sold to Bank of America, and they're like, well, Dave, you kind of suck at this anyway, so off you go. And I was fired from that job. I've never been fired from a job in my life, but it really gave me a chance to, kind of decide what I really want to do with my life. And, I almost went to law school. I got into law school by the skin of my teeth, and then decided not to go, which is good. That's when I, basically took that Merrill Lynch job. And once I was like laid off, I decided, okay, I should really pursue marketing and tech, which is what my degree is in. That's what I want to be doing. And so I looked around at some of the agencies here in PA. They were really, this was back in 2008, remember? So I remember going to one, they were like exclusively focused on terrestrial radio, like FM radio. I was like, what? That's not going to work, And so one night I was actually basically picking up some takeout food from the restaurant I had worked in college. Now, mind you, I'm unemployed, so I was just getting, the back of the house deal on the food. And I saw one of the regulars at the bar, and he's like, Dave, you should, I need to get a website built. You're a marketing person, right? I'm like, I don't know how you remember that from years ago when I worked here, but yes. He's like, well, I have $5,000. And I'm like, well, I am your man, So meanwhile, like, I can't write a single line of code. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was talking to my buddy. He's like, oh, you got to go speak to my neighbor. His name's Sean. He knows this stuff. He's a little bit younger than us, but, he's really on top of that. So, okay, great. So I connect with Sean. Sure enough, he's a programmer and knows what he's talking about. We built that website. It was for a local company. He built that thing in like 10 days, right? It was like the easiest $5,000 I'd ever made. We split the money and said, okay, let's do this again. I'll do this until I get a real job. And before you know it, 1 turns into 5, turns into 10 clients. We're hiring people. We're getting office space. And 16 years later, we've got this agency called Epic Web Studios that we've had, since the beginning. And it's a growing and thriving business, which which we love. So, a couple years ago, though, we're noticing that like the market, we're building these websites and optimizing the heck out of them, and then the client would call and say like, hey, I'm not ranking very well at all. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're in the first position for like 7 different phrases that we know are going to work. They're like, no, I'm not. I'm like, yes, you are. So I realize you're talking about the local pack. You're talking about Google business profiles. Mm-hmm. That's totally different. It's a different set of rules, different set of policies you got to follow. Mm-hmm. We can handle that, and so we would just basically like claim the listing for them. And, we started making it just part of our process that we would just validate the listing and get it up to date for you, because we didn't want to, we have all this great optimization organically, but nothing locally. Well, that's not good. So we just started throwing it in with the services. But then, now this is about, and I'm terrible with the dates, but it's about 2015, Google really starts to get serious about local, right? They roll out their partnership with schema.org. They brought in this CFO from Goldman Sachs named Ruth Porat. She comes in and is like, okay, like time to get serious, guys. We're going to, actually start making some real money around here, and realizes that like Google's going to make more money if we keep you on Google. We can serve more ads. We can control the experience. And they decide that local SEO and these Google business profiles, at the time it was called Google Local Business Center, right? Then they rebrand it to Google My Business, and then years later it becomes Google Business Profile. But they decide that this is going to be there's a huge amount of traffic that comes here. Most people, when they do a search, there's local intent, right? If I'm looking for cheeseburgers and I live in Manhattan, New York, I'm not trying to find results from Los Angeles, right? So there's local intent in most of the searches, which means they can serve those maps results, and they get real serious about all the different things that you can do within Google Business Profile. And so consequently, we could no longer just sort of check the box and validate the listing and it's good. Like, no, we got to be a lot more targeted and serious about this. And so, we started rolling it into an actual service. A couple years into that, we see this product that hits the market. This guy up in Canada named Yann Gilbert comes up with this idea of basically, instead of just, the only type of rank tracking that was available was you would just do a zip code centroid, right? So I'm in the 16501 zip code, and you would just go right to the center of that and then do a search, and that's basically as good as it gets. Yann's like, well, why don't we, instead of doing that, why don't we put a grid and we'll do map pins at given intervals, whatever type of sort of size and radius that you want. So, and Yann's a pretty, here's the thing, the SEO community is pretty large. I always say that if there's like 1 million SEO professionals, there's probably more, but if there's 1 million SEO professionals, there's probably only 10,000 local SEO professionals. It's a pretty specific group and community. So, you're playing in a smaller sandbox for sure, but it's got a ton of authority in it now. Back in the day, though, pre-2015, it was like, this is not important, no one's paying attention to it, whatever, but it continues to kind of rise in importance, and, the group of influencers out there is just not that much bigger. So anyhow, Yann comes up with this idea. I see this and just lose my mind along with the other 1,000 local SEO professionals out there. And I'm like, this is amazing. We got to get this integrated and built. And so I get with Yann on the phone. We have like a 2-hour conversation, and I realize that, he's pretty candid about the whole thing. He's like, look, I'm not a business owner. This is barely a company. It's barely even a product. There's no special IP to it. We could be swallowed up and removed tomorrow. And I kind of don't want to be a business owner, and I don't want to deal with all the support and the stress of that stuff. And I'm like, well, I do, and I got a team that can help with this, and let's do this together. And so we basically partner up on this thing and just kind of run with it. And now Yann is still around today and does he's essentially a platinum product expert at Google, and does a lot for the local SEO community, and certainly knows Local Falcon inside and out, uses it quite a bit, but doesn't run the business day to day or anything like that. So we took that over in, I think it was probably 2019, something like that. And we kind of let it sit there on the shelf, and it would just be an awesome lead gen, right? It would, it was just kind of doing its thing, but we didn't get too aggressive about it. It was in 2022 that we decided, okay, I'm like noticing these signals like, oh my gosh, this thing's really making money and doing well, but the costs are out of control. So, we got to do something about that. We get it basically under control and start taking it more seriously and sort of relaunch this thing in July of 2022. And so So yeah, I know you guys asked me one question and I just keep on talking, and I'm almost done. So we realize that the business starts to take off a lot more once we start putting real efforts towards it, putting transactional emails in there and caring about the user flow and, retention rates and all that type of stuff. And then a year later in 23, this AI revolution is going on. And I'm watching the users at Local Falcon. There's basically three different types, right? There's small business, agency, and enterprise users. And certainly you're going to have just more small business than most of the other user types, just because there's a lot of small businesses out there. And I'm noticing that a lot of the users are coming in, they use it for 3-4 months, and then they leave. And I'm like, why? Trying to figure out what's going on there. And I realized, yeah, of course they're doing this. We're simply an analytics tool showing you your position on the map. Mm-hmm. But we don't tell you how to mitigate that, how to improve it. There's nothing, we give you no other information beyond that. So if you're like a barbershop owner and you see this and you go, oh, cool, I get to see where I'm ranking and how I'm performing and isn't that neat? Yeah, but then you see that 3-4 months later and you're going, okay, it's like the same. I haven't done anything. I don't want to do anything. Why am I paying the $25 again? And then they cancel, understandably, right? So we needed to do something, and I didn't want to, SEO is a very opinionated field. I didn't want to try to get into that, into the game of advice without real substance on it, right? The idea of just generic information is not great. It can get you so far, but you really got to have a more personalized approach. So then this AI revolution is happening, and it's everywhere. And I have this sort of light bulb moment where I'm like, wait a second, we have a ton of data. Right? We have a ton of data about the business and the listing and its performance and all that. And we've got a ton of knowledge from sort of best practice and how to with local SEO. If we can combine that and use a custom AI to actually provide valid, explicitly personalized information, that's going to be a lot better. So it's exactly what we did. We build out what's called Falcon AI, and it essentially takes the three things that matter in terms of local SEO: proximity, prominence, and relevance. We then have the AI essentially looking at those three things combined with actual geographical information and the competitors around there, and we start making recommendations about how to improve your listing. And that was just complete eye-opener for a lot of people. The platform continued to grow, and here we are in a year after that, and we've since then rolled out a co-pilot, so you can go and talk with the system about those results that it gave you and the suggestions. We've also got a new tool for reviews, where it brings in all of your Google reviews as well as the Google reviews of your competitors, and it does a big analysis on that. And it's really, it's kind of incredible what it does. Like it'll come and tell you things like, hey, Sally at the front desk is pretty rude to a lot of customers. You ought to go through some training with her. It'll say stuff like that, and it's pretty shameless about it, which is awesome. And the system's pretty robust now, and it's been growing steadily, since then. Whew, that was like all one word. I'm sorry again, guys.
That was definitely the most thorough intro we've had.
Yeah,
so
that was good.
That was really good. So I definitely want to ask about where it's getting a lot of information. But first, let's start by talking about how to actually optimize for local. A lot of people have the idea that it's sort of a thing you do initially. Like you order a bunch of citations, you come up with a strategy to keep getting like 5-star reviews, and then that's it. Local's taken care of. I think they usually fall behind when that's their strategy, but walk us through what a good strategy is for ranking local.
Sure. So it's definitely, as you described, it's definitely not a sort of check the box situation. Now, citations can be sort of. You get a find essentially the most relevant ones, validate the profile, make sure it's all up to date, and you're pretty much good. You should not just ignore that though. You should definitely go back at least once a year and make sure that it's still there. Checking the indexing status of it. A lot of times people spend a bunch of time on citations, and then you come to find out that they're not even indexed, right? Or they were and they fell out of the index because Google doesn't care about citysearch.com's results, right? They're just not that. It's not providing a bunch of traffic signals to them. It might for some people, but again, it's all about sort sort of the personalized approach to that. So, what matters for one group may not matter for the other. But either way, you do need to put in some considerable effort up front to get your sort of overall web presence clean, and so that it's essentially like name, address, phone number, website is identical across the board. It's going to make it much easier. It doesn't, people will get real specific about if it's Smith and Smith, right? Is it a matter of an ampersand or the word and? Does that matter? It's like, well, no, but I mean, if you can have it the same, then make it the same, right? But it's not the end of the world. Google's pretty savvy about that stuff. They understand. But either way, you got to get those things in order. And that's really just the baseline of it. The next part of it is really about expertise, authority, and trust. So you have to get in there and essentially create signals. You really need to frame the brand for the area of expertise that you offer in the right light. And then from there, you have to kind of continuously chip away at adding more authority to that by creating relevant content, right? So, if you're a barbershop, I mean, there's a lot of different types of, I would be putting up, different articles on, I don't know, different styles of haircut, I guess, different techniques in beauty or whatever, but, putting up content pretty regularly.
Get rid of gray hair.
Right. That would be a popular one among our group, right? Like among the 40 set, right? But yeah, that's so you need to be putting up content around that. And then the other thing lately, especially lately, is sort of the social proof of it all, right? And making sure that you've got testimonials, reviews, case studies showing actual results. So if you're that barbershop, putting up sort of before and after photos with a little testimonial underneath is going to be gold. So it's really an ongoing, non-stop content production process in order to remain relevant. And then the other thing you've got to do, of course, is monitor your competitors and check in on this stuff on a regular basis, which is where Local Falcon comes in and makes sure that, like, hey, you're targeting your efforts in the right direction, not only geographically, but strategically from the key phrases you're looking at.
Well, that's a great answer. And so it's not a set and forget strategy. That's clear.
Unfortunately not.
Yeah. And what's unfortunate as well for many small businesses throughout the world is SEO and having an understanding beyond that of setting up a profile is not in most people's wheelhouses. And yet it can be the lifeblood of small businesses. So it is essential. We know it's important, very, very important to be in the Mac pack. We also know reviews massively helps maintain rankings, keeps you in the Mac pack. Can you give us some real takeaway strategies for small businesses to get in the Mac pack, stay in the Mac pack, and to get 5-star reviews as well?
So, the reviews thing is, it's exhausting. Like, you hear this advice all the time. Oh, get more reviews, but there's not a ton of great strategy around that. And I can give you some generic best practice of like, well, you should set up a CRM, and you basically just need, like any other sale, right? You need to ask for the order. And so if you don't ask for a review, you're probably not going to get one. The moment you start asking, it's going to come, you're probably going to start getting them. And number one, you can't, it's not a great idea to like review gate where you try to keep the people that are frustrated out of the mix. Like, that's not what you want to do. You want to keep just complete transparency is really the best practice there. Truthfully, like, if you're getting 1-star reviews, like, you should look at this and consider it and do something about it. Maybe you shouldn't be in that business, or maybe you should, but you just need to make some changes. I don't know, but either way, being transparent about your reviews is important. So how do you get them? I mean, like I said, you've got to ask. So I think elegantly timed requests are the way to go, right? So if I'm at a restaurant, you don't need to be asking me to leave a review while we've just served the bread, right? You got to wait until the bill has been paid and they've walked out the door at that point, right? Like, that's when you start to ask, right? Ask at the right time. That matters. Then you're going to actually get more of them. How you ask is also important. So, maybe it's it's an email that you got from them. Maybe it's a little QR code that they can, scan on their way out the door. You put it on the receipt somewhere that they can go get it that way. But the key is to just consistently keep asking for them, and then also looking at the right platforms, right? Google reviews are absolutely like sort of at the top of the list, number one, but that doesn't discount Yelp and Facebook and TripAdvisor and all the other sources that are out there. Again, it's sort of industry specific, right? Within the digital marketing world, a lot of people use Clutch. Clutch is very critical for that. But if you're like a law firm, Clutch is just that's not for you. You've got to find, that's probably better that you're on, Super Lawyers or some other type of system, right? So it really, you've got to identify what are the competitors doing, where are they getting reviews, where are they getting traffic, and then go and implement a similar strategy around that.
All right, and so let's talk about someone does leave a bad review. How do you respond to that? And then when can you have a review moved? When does it make sense to actually try and have something removed?
Sure. So you should be responding to every review. Typically best practice is do it as quickly as possible. There's definitely, like, Google will certainly not, document or say this, but they reward users who are active in their profile management, right? So when you're just ignoring all of your reviews, whether they're positive or negative, that's not exactly a good signal that you care about this listing and you're doing what's needed to keep the community happy and grow. So you do need to respond to all of them, positive or negative, and you should be, again, very sort of transparent in that part as well. I see a lot of people come in and they'll, get angry in their review responses. They're like, I can't believe you would say something like that. Like, no, that's not the best approach, right? Like, it's not a dialogue. This is there's not a thread system here. It's simply they leave one, you respond. That's the end of the discussion. So if there's a problem, take that offline, right? Take that outside of the space, but get your reply in there as quickly as possible. And then in terms of getting them removed, it's very, very difficult to do it. And I wouldn't suggest that anyone really attempt to do this unless it's a flagrant violation of their terms of service, right? So if there's a bunch of hate speech in there, they're libelous or something like that, like when it's a very clear flagrant problem, that's when you can report it. When they're clearly spam, you can report those. When sometimes competitors get fake reviews pumped into their system, and that's also a reportable offense, is when it's clearly fake but all 5 stars, right? So it's important that you do this when necessary. Otherwise, the only way to combat a negative review is more positive reviews. So and that's a tough beat, because you've got a single 1-star review. If you've got a whole bunch of other reviews, you probably need 5, 10, maybe 20 5-star reviews just to offset that 1 star. It's unfortunate, but that's kind of, it's all an average system, right? So when you have a 1-star, that's going to drag the average way down, which means you need to get a whole bunch of 5 stars in order to improve that, right? So the best way to beat a bad review is a positive one.
That was my old life. I used to have a restaurant business, and we used to go weeks and weeks and weeks with 5-star reviews, and I'd feel good, and then maybe, like, I don't know, a day before I was about to go on holiday for a week, a 1-star review would come in, and you'd just be like, I knew that was going to happen, and then you
And how did you handle it, Chris?
I did not handle it well, my friend.
Yeah, not a great way to kick off the holiday, that's for sure. So yeah, it's really tricky to deal with that. But again, I think transparency is key. I think just be open with customers. I also think that people actually read through reviews, especially in something like restaurants, right? And so I think that your response is equally as important as that 1 star. It may be a valid 1 star, but how you handle that reply is something that people actually notice and value and weigh in when they're making that decision. And so I think it's important that you show, hey, we've let you down at your most recent visit or whatever. Like, we want the chance to earn this back. We're really sorry about that. Please come back in, whatever. Make the effort to make them happy. And, I think the consumers will respond to that. Same goes with, a lot of times you'll just see disgruntled people leaving disgruntled reviews. That shines through as well, and I think people, kind of like, people just kind of dismiss that and keep on moving,
There's a famous 1-star review that's done the rounds, I think, on social. Somebody left on the Grand Canyon, and it just said, "There's not much to see."
That's exactly right.
So yeah, I think people can read through them. Yeah,
bunch of dirt around this place. That's all it is. It's like, that's wild.
I think it was Stonehenge, though. That's the one that was nice. The review was, it's just a bunch of rocks.
That's awesome.
But it's a good point. I think when I look at reviews, I always look at the negative reviews, and then I'm always trying to see if that person is just whining about something, right? So it's like when I'm looking at Airbnb, for example, if they're like, it was cold, like just things that you're like, that doesn't matter, or they're out of control, out of the control of the place, like that. So I think that is important. One thing you mentioned earlier that I thought was interesting is you talked about looking at competitors' reviews for insights. What kind of insights can you get from your competitors' reviews?
Oh my gosh, a whole bunch. So, the especially when you look at them in aggregate, you can find essentially, and I hate to be like business school terminology here, but the SWOT analysis, which is strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats, right? So when you apply sort of that SWOT analysis point of view, when doing reviews, you can get a lot of really good information. And so you can see opportunities where, if people are complaining about, I don't know, the parking at this other, at this competitor's location, well, maybe you should talk about how great the parking is at your location, right? And highlight that as an awesome feature because you noticed that everyone complains about the parking at that competitor, right? So it's really about getting insight as to where their strengths and weaknesses are and then improving your business as a result of that. So Local Falcon's got this review analysis tool where it does exactly that. And I remember seeing one, it was insane. It was like it was an ice cream shop and it said, hey, your competing ice cream shop down the street sells cherry ice cream and people love it. You should consider selling cherry ice cream as well. And it's like, yeah, that's the type of stuff that you want to, you may not notice that or know about that until you actually go in and start looking at something in aggregate like that where you start to see patterns and trends, because if this ice cream shop, they had like 600 some reviews. It wasn't like a ton, but I mean, that's a lot for an ice cream shop. I mean, I'm sitting here with, I don't know, we have like 30 at the agency, right? Like there's not a ton. So they had a lot, but if out of those 600, 75 people are talking about this cherry ice cream and they love this stuff, like, yeah, maybe you don't have that, you should probably think about it.
Yeah. That's really interesting, and that's an untapped resource of information. My family's had the restaurant business that we've had for decades now. So I remember 20, 30 years ago being the child that was sent in undercover to the competitor's shop to go and check their prices and buy a couple of things, see if they were doing anything different. But all that information can be readily available now. So it's best to go through that, utilize it for your own benefits. That's really interesting.
That's awesome. Well, Chris, when we're done here, you'll have to send me the name of the restaurant, and I'll get you a review analysis that you can take back to mom and dad.
And some more advice on how to handle those 1-star reviews.
That's right.
Okay, so in terms of actually optimizing the business profile, can you give us some really actionable, where you would start, run it through in order to really optimize that profile for local businesses? Sure.
So the probably most important component of this is it's actually the simplest piece, is the category. So frequently we see the category is not optimized the way it should be. Now, if you're, so let's take a law firm as an example, right? And law firms historically have a really hard time with this because if they're a firm, they've got probably multiple areas of specialization. And so they want to be able to highlight all of those, but it's almost like, well, now we're trying to say too many things at once. It sort of dilutes the whole thing. So instead of that, I would say focus on your most profitable areas and try to go in that direction, make that the category name. It just sort of depends. It's always location specific, but the category is definitely in my opinion, the number one most important mover of the needle, right? So I'll give you an example. We had on the agency side, I think it was just marketing agency or maybe website designer. That's what it was. It was website designer. And we had very few marketing leads coming around. We added digital marketing agency as a secondary category, and all of a sudden we're ranking for that term, So that's the category is critical. The other one, and unfortunately this is, I don't like to give black hat advice here, but the other piece that matters is the title of the listing. So the best, now Google is pretty adamant that the name of the listing needs to match the name of the business, right? Which is why you've seen those examples of like, there was a dentist office that renamed the business, like went to the state and like filed the paperwork to rename it Dentist Near Me as the name of the business,
Nice.
right? Because
Exact
you
match.
cannot exact match. That's it. You cannot put in, if you're a dentist, you can't say Nick Biggs Dentist Near Me. You can't say that. You could say Nick Biggs Dentistry, something like that. If that's the name, it's got to be whatever the name of the actual business is. And so you're technically supposed to like change the name. File it's called a DBA with the federal government and the state saying, oh, we're doing business as this name. Once you've done that and you've updated your signage, now you can essentially go to Google and change that name. Now, does everyone do that? Probably not. But I would never endorse that or recommend that on like a mass scale to people. But between you and I on this podcast, yeah, I'm telling you now, that does make a big difference. So if you're willing to like do the work and change the name of the business with the state and the feds and everything, then yeah, that's going to probably be another big factor. And then from there, it's like, again, the three things that come in to like ranking here, it's proximity, prominence, and relevance. You can't really do much about proximity. I mean, you could get a new office location wherever it is you're trying to rank. That's very pricey and time consuming and whatever. But so there's not a ton you can do about proximity. But prominence and relevance, those are pretty murky terms. Like, what does that even, like, what do you mean prominence? What do you mean relevance? Those are the things where it's signals that come in. That's why you do things like citations and get a bunch of mentions from other places, right? Because that's affecting your prominence. You're doing things like getting more reviews and getting a consistent, steady stream of reviews, which we haven't really touched on. Yeah, you don't want a whole bunch of reviews all at once and then none. But either way, when you've got a steady stream of reviews, that's also helping your prominence, right? Now, relevance is just simply what it is that you offer, right? And that's where that category kind of comes into play, right? So if I'm I specialize in criminal law, and then all of a sudden I've got I want to start ranking for business law and litigation. Well, that's a very different thing. And so you're not necessarily relevant in terms of someone looking for litigation. You specialize in criminal law, right? So it's important that you get the right terminology in there, that you're kind of focusing the efforts in the right space. Otherwise, that relevancy goes out the window.
How does this differ for businesses that have a service area rather than a physical office location?
That's a good point. Service area businesses have always been sort of the, the ugly step sibling of the system. The reason for that is because the product itself, Google Business Profiles, is a Google Maps product, right? It's powered by Google Maps. And so, that's basically like, and maps require a latitude and a longitude, right? Like they really would prefer a physical location so that they can center you, and then from there you can have your, expansion, etc. And so without that, as a service area business, all you can do is sort of like draw a circle. Oh, yep, this is where this is the areas I serve. And you just kind of have to hope that you're going to show up for that stuff. But when there's a bunch of physically located businesses that are there, and you're a service area, chances are low that you're going to be the one outranking them. Now, you can do things like, again, have that expertise, authority, and trust by building out more content and getting the better social proof and more reviews and all that. And if you do that enough, you are absolutely going to combat those physical location businesses. But they are essentially, like I said, they're sort of a second-class citizen there when it comes to how Google treats them. So I don't love them. Now, they have been gaining more authority over the years, right? Google launched the LSAs, they're called, local service ads, and all of a sudden they started treating those service area businesses a lot more prominently and giving them a little bit more of an equal footing. But Google's like a steam tanker, man. They don't update things. There's lots of algorithm changes and tweaks that happen every day, all the time. There's like core algorithm updates every quarter, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's still the same basic principles that are going to matter here, which is why that service area business, even with their shiny, LSA products and all these other ways, even with all that in place, the core still still is going to preference the actual physical location.
So if you are a plumber, electrician, something like that, you want to register an actual office, even if you don't serve any customers out, right? Let's say a lot of them have they might have a home shop, right? And then they service that area. Do you still want to register some sort of location so that you can show up there? And then when people are searching near you, you're more likely to show up. Is that correct?
So that's the thing. If you've got a home business, you really you're not supposed to have a listing, right? You're not supposed to put your listing at a house. It's technically against the terms. So you really should be a service area business. So it's hard to answer that question in a blanket way. It really just depends, which is why it's so important to look at your actual local market. If you're a plumber and you're in, I don't know, Dallas, Texas, right? There's a lot of plumbers in Dallas, Texas, I'm sure. What is it that the top plumbers in Dallas are actually doing? Do they have physical locations, or are they SABs? SAB is service area business. So it just depends. If there's a bunch of SABs there, then you're probably okay to create an SAB listing. But if it's all physical locations, you're probably going to have more of an uphill battle. That's where you may want to, start running ads and looking into the LSAs and doing it that way. But you should not be creating a listing for your house. You really do need an actual office. And they stop messing around with the way they do verification anymore. It's all video verification. And so there's very little you can do to kind of get around that, if anything. It used to be much easier. You cannot do that now. It's you have to have an actual physical video on location that goes into detail. Show the sign, show the street, walk in the door, show the physical products. They want all of that in this verification video. They are not. Yeah.
Okay, David, look, this has been fantastic. As we're progressing towards the end, let's just take an example. A very extremely competitive local market with a competitive local business. Is it worth building backlinks, and can that help them rank higher?
Yes, absolutely. Backlinks still matter in 2024. It's another one of the many different signals that go into ranking well. And it's one of those things. I mean, I talked about the category. That's such a simple idea of just set the category or the business name. But beyond that, as soon as you're past sort of those real low-hanging fruits, you've got to get into the more tried and true methodology, which is absolutely backlinks, signals, things like that matter more than ever. And for a local business in a competitive area, you'd be surprised. It may not be as difficult as you think, right? Maybe you simply need to, get some mentions in, join the Chamber of Commerce, get a BBB profile, get some mentions in the local newspaper or something like that. Our AI does a lot of suggestions around sponsoring events, right? It'll find a popular event near you. It'll be the county fair happens every year. You should go sponsor the county fair. And then all of a sudden you'll get a link from the county fair to your website, and boom, you've got more authority now. So, that type of stuff is really important. Spray and pray backlinking is not a good idea. That does not typically work.
Yeah, I think in most marketing strategies, that's not a great tactic.
Right.
Okay, David, it's been great having you on. For people who want to connect with you, where should we send them?
Localfalcon.com, without a doubt, is the best way to find us. And then certainly you can look me up on LinkedIn. I am lurking on there pretty regularly. I don't post a lot, but I am on there. And so feel free to message me on LinkedIn. Yeah, for sure, man. I maybe the brand can get out there, but I stopped kind of promoting myself a long time ago.
Okay, David, well, thank you so much for being such a great guest. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
3, 2, 1, yeah! And that wraps up this episode of Market Movers, Building Brands and Links with Linkify. Big thanks to our parent company, Linkify, the wizards behind turning ambitious businesses into standout brands. Hit up our website at linkify.io and take the first steps towards brand greatness. Big shout out to Fame for making this podcast possible. Thanks for listening, folks. Stick around for more insights in our next episode. Catch you later.